Hello, Boldarians, and welcome back to Boldly Becoming, the space where we talk about living boldly, walking in purpose, and answering the call on your life. I'm your host, Kenyatta, and today we are closing out June. But before we do, I need to tell you something. When I wrote the script for this recap, which literally was a few weeks ago, I thought I already knew what June had taught me. I thought this month was going to be about slowing down, choosing joy, embracing rest, and reconnecting with myself. And those lessons were real. But life had another chapter to write. And if I'm honest, the past few weeks have been some of the heaviest I've experienced in a long time. I found myself navigating painful conversations with someone I love deeply, conversations that required vulnerability, honesty, and left my heart carrying more than I expected. Before I even had time to process it, I experienced two losses that were in mere hours of each other. And when I say losses, I am talking about deaths. There were moments when it felt like one wave came after another. And yet, as I sit here recording this tonight, I'm not overwhelmed by everything that went wrong. I'm overwhelmed by the God who never left. Whew. Because as I look back over every episode we shared this month, I realized they weren't just messages I was recording for you. They became truths I had to lean on myself, conversations about rest, reminders to choose joy, invitation to be present, and the encouragement to soften. I didn't know it then, but God was preparing my heart before I even knew what was coming. This month taught me something I don't ever want to forget. Healing isn't about avoiding pain. It's about discovering that even when life is hard, God's presence doesn't leave. And maybe that's the lesson I was meant to learn all along. You know, one of the things I love most about reflecting at the end of each month is that it gives me the opportunity to see what I couldn't always see while I was living it. I also love that about journaling too. So if you haven't journaled in a while, get your journal out. It's great. When you're walking through life day by day, you're just trying to make the next faithful step. But when you pause and look back, you begin to notice God's fingerprints. You begin to recognize prayers you didn't realize He was answering. You begin to see how He was preparing you in ways you couldn't have understood at that time. And that's exactly what happened to me in this month. So today, I don't just want to recap the episodes we released. I want to share what God was teaching me through them and what He continued teaching me when life became far more difficult than I expected. Because looking back now, I realized June wasn't a month of reflection. It actually, now that we are at the end of June, it became a testimony. And as I started looking back over each episode, something became so clear to me. Every conversation we had this month was preparing me for something I didn't know was coming. And it isn't that just like God? Sometimes He teaches us lessons that don't make complete sense in the moment, and then life happens, and suddenly we realize He wasn't just speaking to us, He was preparing us. The very first episode this month was called When Rest Feels Uncomfortable. At the time, I thought God was simply teaching me to slow down, and God knows I need to slow down at times. I thought He was inviting me to stop glorifying exhaustion, stop believing that productivity determined my worth, to stop treating rest like it's something I had to earn. And while I still believe all of that, of course, looking back now, I think He was teaching me something even deeper. He was showing me where to go when life became heavy. Because over these past few weeks, past few days really, I haven't needed more productivity. I haven't needed more strength. I haven't needed another checklist. I've needed His presence. I've needed a place where I didn't have to pretend I was okay. I've needed permission to simply sit with Him while my heart caught up with everything that had happened. And I'm realizing that now. Maybe that's what true rest has always been. not escaping life, not pretending everything is fine, but finding a place where your soul can finally exhale because you know you're not carrying the weight alone. Then we talked and walked into the version of me that only exists on vacation. I remember asking myself why it was so much easier to laugh, breathe, to be present, and to feel lighter when I was away from everyday responsibilities. I wanted that version of me to exist at home too. At the time, I thought the lesson was bringing more joy into my everyday life. And I still believe that. Oh, and I do. But now I see something else. Peace isn't something we only experience when life is easy. Peace is like a person. It's the presence of God that remains with us, whether we're on vacation, sitting in our living room, standing in a hospital room, or preparing for a funeral. Circumstances may change. God's presence doesn't. And that realization has carried me through these last few weeks in ways I don't even have words for. Then came one of my favorite conversations, joy without a crisis. And if I'm honest, I didn't realize how much I would need that reminder. Because after everything that's happened this month, it would be easy to believe that joy and grief can't exist together. But they can. I've cried this month. I've laughed this month. I've grieved. I've hugged people I love. I sat in silence. I've thanked God. I've questioned things. I've smiled at memories. I've even cried over new realities. And none of those moments canceled the others out. Joy didn't dishonor my grief. Grief didn't erase my joy. They simply sat beside each other. And maybe that's one of the greatest gifts God has given us, the ability to carry sorrow without losing hope. I used to think faith meant always feeling strong. This month reminded me that faith can also look like showing up with tears in your eyes and still believing God is good. The ability to experience joy without pretending life isn't hard, because biblical joy has never depended on perfect circumstances. It has always depended on a faithful God. You know, the one thing I've been thinking about over the past few days is how emergencies have a way of changing everything in an instant. One phone call, one conversation, one unexpected moment. And suddenly, the life you had planned for the week no longer exists. What's interesting, though, is that while your world feels like it has stopped, everyone else's keeps moving. The emails still come, people still need you, work still has to be covered, responsibilities don't disappear. Life keeps asking you to make decisions while you're still trying to process what just happened. And if you've ever been there, you know how exhausting that can be. That's exactly where I found myself this week. Not only was I trying to process my own grief, but I also had to make arrangements at the hospital. Then I came home and realized something else. I'm also the owner of my own private practice. There wasn't anyone else who could make those phone calls or send those messages for me. So I sat down and began contacting each of my clients, rescheduling appointments, apologizing for the inconvenience, trying to make sure everyone still had a place to land, even though my own world had been turned upside down. One by one, I scrolled through my schedule, looking at each name, sending each message, finding each person another appointment. And then I had to stop. Not because I was overwhelmed by the cancellations, but I was overwhelmed by God's faithfulness. As I looked at my calendar, I realized I was rescheduling 13 clients, and that's just for 2 days. And immediately my mind went back to the beginning of Relentless Counseling. And those of you who are just joining, I am also a therapist, and my private practice name is Relentless Counseling for those who are new Bodarians. But there was a season when I prayed for one client, just one. And I remember wondering how God was going to grow this practice. I remember hoping someone would trust me enough to let me walk alongside them. I remember dreaming about what this practice could become one day. And tonight, without even realizing it, I was looking at the evidence that God had been answering those prayers all along. Not because my calendar was full, but because every single name on that schedule represented a person who trusted me with part of their story. And guys, that is an incredible responsibility I get to hold. It's an incredible and amazing privilege. And right there in the middle of one of the hardest months I've had in a long time, God gently reminded me of something I desperately needed to see. Sometimes we're so busy living answered prayers that we forget they were once prayers. Whew. I had to sit there for a minute because it's so easy to become consumed by what's hurting, the grief, the funeral, the conversations that are still heavy on my heart, the disappointment, the uncertainty. All of those things are real, but so is God's goodness. Both can exist at the same time. I can grieve and still be grateful. I can cry and still recognize God's provision. I can experience loss and still stand in the middle of blessings I once only dreamed about. That moment changed something in me because I realized gratitude isn't pretending life is perfect. Gratitude is choosing to notice God's faithfulness even while life is imperfect. And I wonder, how many answered prayers are sitting in our lives today that we've stopped noticing because they've become normal? The job you once prayed for, the marriage you prayed for, the child you prayed for, the home you hoped for, the healing you've experienced, the friendships God brought into your life, the opportunities you never thought would come. Sometimes we become so familiar with God's blessings that we forget to stop and thank Him. Tonight, my calendar didn't remind me of everything I had to cancel. It reminded me of everything God had built. And in that moment, my tears turned into worship. And as I bring this month to a close, I don't walk away from June pretending it was easy. Because, baby, it wasn't. There are conversations I'm still processing. There is grief I'm still carrying. In fact, as this episode airs, I'll be just one day away from laying to rest an amazing woman, my aunt. A woman who loved fiercely, laughed wholeheartedly, and yes, taught me how to make the best spaghetti. And if you ever had my spaghetti, just know it's only as good as it is because she took the time to teach me. She was also a true Boulderian. She never missed an episode. So this episode right here, this one is for you, Auntie. Somehow, knowing she'll never hear another new episode on this side of heaven is the thought that still hard for me to wrap my head around in my heart. Tomorrow there will be tears. Tears because I'll miss her. Tears because saying goodbye to someone you love is never easy. But there will also be gratitude. Gratitude for the years we were given. Gratitude for every lesson she taught me and taught all my other cousins. Gratitude for every laugh we shared. Gratitude that God allowed our stories to intersect the way they did. And gratitude that she is now at peace in the presence of the Lord. And as I cry tears of grief, I also cry tears of gratitude, not because losing her doesn't hurt, because it does, but because even in one of the hardest months I've experienced in a long time, God never left me. He prepared me before I knew I would need the preparation. He surrounded me with people who loved me well. He reminded me of prayers he had already answered, and he gave me strength when I didn't think I had any left. And he stayed with me through every difficult conversation, every loss, every tear, every moment of uncertainty. So when I look back over June now, I don't just see heartbreak. I see God's fingerprints. I see his provision. I see his comfort. I see his faithfulness. And earlier in this episode, I told you that I thought June was going to teach me about rest, joy, and slowing down. And it did. It promised that. But looking back now, I think the greatest lesson God taught me was this: I don't have to hold myself together. I only have to let Him hold me. And that changes everything. Because maybe you've been listening today while carrying your own version of June. Maybe your story doesn't look anything like mine. Maybe you're grieving someone you love. Maybe you're carrying disappointment. Maybe you're waiting on prayers that still haven't been answered. And maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you're simply trying to make it through one day at a time. And maybe you know exactly what I feel like because you've been there too, and you remember the lessons and the blessings God carried you through those times. Wherever you are, I want you to know this. God is just as present in the painful seasons as He is in the peaceful ones. He is still writing your story. He is still carrying what feels too heavy for you. He is still working in ways you cannot yet see. And one day, I pray you'll look back and recognize His fingerprints all over the places where you once thought He was silent. If June taught me anything, it's this. Don't miss God's faithfulness because you're only looking at your circumstances. Sometimes the very season that feels like it's breaking you is a season that was quietly building your testimony. So before you rush into July, take a moment. Look back. Thank Him for what He's done. Trust Him with what you're still waiting on. And remember, sometimes we're so busy living answered prayers that we forget they were once prayers. Thank you for walking through June with me. Thank you for allowing me to be honest. And thank you for creating a community where we don't have to pretend we've got it all together. I truly believe we're becoming exactly who God is calling us to be, one faithful step at a time. As always, continue living boldly, walking in purpose. And I want to correct that. Walking in your purpose that God gave you and answering the call on your life. Until next time, this is Boldly Becoming. God, thank you for June.